Absalom is a novel by William Faulkner, one of the most prominent and influential American writers of the 20th century. The novel, published in 1936, is set in the American South and tells the story of the rise and fall of Thomas Sutpen, a wealthy plantation owner, and his family. The narrative is complex and nonlinear, with multiple narrators and flashbacks, and explores themes of race, class, and the legacy of the past. Faulkner's poetic and experimental style, combined with his unflinching examination of the South's troubled history, has made Absalom, a classic of American literature and a significant contribution to the genre of Southern Gothic fiction. The Southern Gothic tradition. The Southern Gothic literary tradition is a subgenre of American Gothic literature that emerged in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, primarily in the southern United States. This literary movement is characterized by a focus on the grotesque, the macabre, and the darkly psychological aspects of human nature. In Southern Gothic literature, there is often a sense of decay and decayed aristocracy, haunted by the ghosts of the past. The settings are often dark and foreboding, such as old plantations, dilapidated mansions, or isolated rural communities. The characters are typically flawed, and the narratives often explore issues related to race, gender, and class. William Faulkner is one of the most famous authors associated with the Southern Gothic tradition. His works, such as Absalom, and The Sound and the Fury, are known for their complex narratives, stream of consciousness writing style, and exploration of dark themes such as incest, murder, and mental illness. These works feature disturbing imagery, ghostly presences, and characters haunted by their own pasts, making them prime examples of the Southern Gothic literary tradition. The legacy of slavery. One of the key themes of the novel is the legacy of slavery in the American South. Faulkner explores the psychological effects of slavery on both white and black characters, and shows how the legacy of slavery continues to shape the region long after its legal abolition. The legacy of slavery is a theme that appears in many works of literature that deal with the history of the American South. In Absalom, Faulkner examines the psychological effects of slavery on both white and black characters and how it continues to shape the region long after the legal abolition of slavery. For many years, slavery was a defining feature of the American South. It had a profound impact on the lives of those who were enslaved and their descendants, as well as on the lives of their owners and the wider community. In Absalom, Faulkner explores the legacy of slavery through the characters of Thomas Sutpen, his family, and his community. The novel shows how the psychological effects of slavery can be seen in the behavior of the white characters, who are often obsessed with maintaining their social status and preserving their family's legacy. They are shown as being willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their interests, including using violence and deceit. The nature of storytelling. Absalom is a novel that is deeply concerned with the act of storytelling itself. The novel is narrated from multiple perspectives, and the truth of the events it describes is always in question. Faulkner explores the way that stories are constructed and reconstructed over time, and shows how the act of telling a story can be a deeply political and ethical act. In Absalom, the nature of storytelling is a central theme that permeates the entire novel. William Faulkner's work is concerned with exploring how stories are created, told, and retold over time, and how the truth of these stories is often ambiguous and subjective. The novel is narrated from multiple perspectives, with each character offering their own version of events, creating a complex and layered narrative. Through the various perspectives, Faulkner shows how the act of storytelling can be a political and ethical act. The characters' versions of the story are shaped by their own biases, desires, and agendas, and the way they tell the story can have significant consequences for themselves and others. Faulkner highlights the power dynamics at play in storytelling, as those with the ability to tell and control the narrative can wield significant influence over others. The novel also delves into the idea of the construction and reconstruction of stories over time. The truth of the events described in the novel is always in question, and as the characters retell the story, details are added, omitted, or changed altogether. Faulkner suggests that the way stories are told and retold can shape our understanding of history and influence our perceptions of the present. In summary, Absalom is a novel that explores the complex nature of storytelling, showing how the act of telling a story can be a deeply political and ethical act. Faulkner highlights the power dynamics at play in storytelling and the construction and reconstruction of stories over time, emphasizing how the way stories are told and retold can shape our understanding of the world around us. The decline of the Southern aristocracy. The novel takes place in the years leading up to the Civil War and the Reconstruction era that followed. Faulkner shows how the decline of the Southern aristocracy during this period is tied to the broader political and social changes taking place in the country as a whole. The decline of the Southern aristocracy refers to the gradual loss of power and influence that the wealthy, landowning class in the southern United States experienced in the years leading up to the Civil War and during the Reconstruction era that followed. The novel, likely referring to William Faulkner's Absalom, is set during this period and explores how this decline was tied to larger political and social changes that were taking place in the country. Faulkner shows how the Civil War and the end of slavery brought about significant economic and social changes in the South, disrupting the traditional power structure and way of life that had been maintained by the aristocracy for generations. With the collapse of the plantation economy, many wealthy landowners found themselves struggling to maintain their wealth and status. At the same time, the political landscape of the country was undergoing significant shifts, as the power of the federal government increased and the concept of states' rights was challenged. This further eroded the power of the Southern aristocracy, who had long relied on their political connections and influence to maintain their position of authority. Overall, Faulkner's novel explores how the decline of the Southern aristocracy was a complex and multifaceted process, influenced by both economic and political factors, and deeply intertwined with the history of the United States as a whole. Family dynamics. At its core, Absalom is a novel about families and the complex relationships that exist within them. Faulkner explores themes of sibling rivalry, parental favoritism, and the ways in which family members can both support and betray one another. William Faulkner's Absalom delves deep into the intricate dynamics of families and the relationships that shape them. At the heart of the novel is the story of the Sutpin family, a wealthy and influential clan in the antebellum South. Faulkner examines how the family members interact with each other, both individually and collectively, and how their actions impact their relationships. Sibling rivalry is a significant theme in the novel.